The threshold of a new world, the bustling joint family household, the rhythmic clinking of heavy brass bangles against marble, the sharp hiss of a pressure cooker releasing steam, and the faint scent of freshly brewed cardamom tea, filled the early morning air of the Siddiqui household. It was a sprawling, three-story joint family home nestled in a traditional neighborhood. On the surface, the house exuded warmth and togetherness. 4 generations lived under one roof. The elderly grandparents, the family patriarchs, their sons, daughters-in-law, and a swarm of energetic children running through the central courtyard. For Ayesha, however, this house felt like a grand stage where she was expected to perform perfectly every single day, without making a single mistake. Ayesha had been married to Hassan for barely 6 months. Coming from a quiet, nuclear family where mornings were peaceful and conversations were soft, stepping into a joint family of 14 members was an overwhelming culture shock. She was the youngest daughter-in-law, which meant her days began before sunrise and ended long after the rest of the household had gone to sleep. She stood in the spacious, bustling kitchen, wiping beads of perspiration from her forehead with the edge of her dupatta. The heat from the gas stoves was stifling. "Ayesha! Is the tea ready yet?" called out Khala Asma, Hassan's mother, from the adjacent courtyard. Her voice was sharp, carried by decades of authority as the eldest matriarch of the house. "Your father-in-law needs to take his morning medicine, and your sister-in-law Hina has to leave for college. Ami John, just 2 minutes." Ayesha called back softly, her voice trembling slightly. She quickly strained the tea into a large silver tray, balancing 7 cups along with plates of rusks and biscuits. As she lifted the heavy tray, her hands shook slightly from fatigue. She hadn't slept well, her back throbbed from scrubbing clothes the previous evening, but she swallowed her discomfort, forced a gentle smile onto her face, and stepped out into the courtyard. Sitting in the corner of the courtyard, sipping a glass of water before heading to his job at the local bank, was Hassan. Hassan was a quiet, observant man of 30. Unlike his elder brothers who were vocal, authoritative, and often demanding toward their wives, Hassan possessed a quiet depth. He didn't make grand speeches, nor did he believe in asserting his presence through noise. But his eyes, sharp and deeply empathetic, noticed everything. He watched Ayesha step into the courtyard. He noticed the dark circles beneath her eyes, the subtle tremor in her hands as she served tea to his mother, and the way she instinctively held her breath whenever his elder aunt offered a critical remark about the temperature of the tea. "It needs more sugar, Ayesha," Khala Asma remarked, taking a small sip and setting the cup down with a light clatter. "Back in my day, a new bride knew the exact taste of every family member within a week." Ayesha lowered her head. "I am sorry, Ami. I will fix it right away." "Leave it." Hassan's elder sister, Hina, chimed in with a playful yet stinging laugh. "If she goes back to the kitchen now, I'll be late for my bus. I'll just drink it as it is." Ayesha felt a lump form in her throat. She stood there silently, feeling small, exposed, and utterly alone amidst a crowd of people. Hassan quietly set his glass down. He didn't rise to pick a fight, nor did he lecture his mother or sister. Instead, he picked up his cup of tea, took a sip, and looked up at Ayesha. When their eyes met, Hassan didn't offer a dramatic expression of pity. He simply gave her a subtle, reassuring nod, a tiny gesture that silently communicated, "I see you. I see how hard you are trying." Ayesha caught that look. It was fleeting, lasting no more than 2 seconds. But inside her chest, the heavy knot of anxiety loosened just a little. The evening gathering in the courtyard in a joint family. Evening time was the grand court where the day's events were discussed, analyzed, and often criticized. The men returned from their offices and businesses, while the women gathered to prepare dinner and manage the children. Hassan's eldest brother, Tariq, was a successful businessman who ran a lucrative textile trade. Tariq believed that a man's duty to his wife began and ended with financial indulgence. He frequently brought home expensive silk saris, gold bangles, and imported perfumes for his wife, Seima. That evening, Tariq walked into the courtyard carrying a velvet box and a branded shopping bag. "Look, Seima," Tariq announced proudly in front of everyone, tossing the shopping bag onto the sofa. "I bought you that designer lawn suit you were eyeing last week, and here, a real gold necklace from the jeweler downtown." Seima's eyes sparkled as she opened the velvet box. "Oh, Tariq, it's beautiful. Everyone, look at what Tariq brought for me." The courtyard erupted in praise. "Tariq is so generous." Khala Asma smiled proudly at her eldest son. "He knows how to keep his wife happy. A woman only craves jewelry and fine clothes." Seima beamed, holding the gold necklace against her neck, but as the excitement settled, Tariq sat down on the armchair and barked, "Seima, where is my dinner? I've been working all day to afford these luxuries for you, and my plate isn't even on the table yet. Hurry up." Seima's smile instantly vanished. I was helping in the kitchen, Tariq, but the kids were crying. "I don't want excuses," Tariq interrupted sternly, his voice echoing across the courtyard. "I earn the money. I bring you gold, and all I ask in return is a hot meal on time. Is that too much to ask?" Seima quietly packed away her gold necklace, her eyes filling with unshed tears, and rushed into the kitchen, her moment of joy completely crushed under the weight of her husband's harshness. Standing near the staircase, Hassan watched the entire exchange. He glanced over at Ayesha, who was busy folding laundry near the inner corridor. Ayesha was looking at Seima's gold necklace with a bittersweet expression, not out of envy for the gold, but out of sympathy for Seima's immediate humiliation. Hassan walked up the stairs toward their small bedroom on the second floor. He didn't have a flourishing business like Tariq. His salary as a bank officer was modest, and a large portion of it went into the shared family pool for household expenses. He couldn't afford to shower Ayesha with gold necklaces or designer suits every month. When Ayesha entered their room later that evening to drop off his ironed clothes, she looked tired. Her shoulders slouched, and the spirit in her eyes seemed dimmed by the sheer volume of housework she had managed all day. She set his shirt on the bed and turned to leave. "I will go help in the kitchen for dinner." "Ayesha," Hassan called out softly. She paused, turning back. "Yes." Hassan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, simple paper bag. It wasn't velvet, nor was it wrapped in shiny ribbon. Inside were two fresh, fragrant strands of white jasmine flowers, gadras, that he had bought from a street vendor near his office for a few rupees. He walked over to her, took her hand gently, and placed the flowers in her palm. Ayesha looked down at the delicate white blossoms. The sweet, natural aroma filled the air between them. "I know it's not gold, Ayesha," Hassan said quietly, his voice laced with genuine warmth, "and I know how hard you worked today. Thank you for taking care of my family." Ayesha stared at the flowers, then raised her eyes to look at Hassan. Her breath caught in her throat. All evening, she had watched Seima receive a fortune in gold, only to be barked at moments later. But here was Hassan, offering her a gesture that cost almost nothing in money, yet carried the weight of pure, unadulterated respect. Tears welled up in Ayesha's eyes, but for the first time that day, a genuine radiant smile broke across her face. "These flowers," Ayesha whispered, her voice trembling slightly, "are worth more to me than all the gold in the world." Hassan smiled softly, tying the flowers around her wrist. He hadn't spent a fortune, he had simply offered his attention, his gratitude, and his heart. The ruined dinner and public criticism. In a traditional joint family, the kitchen is not just a place where food is cooked. It is the ultimate courtroom of a woman's competence. A single mistake in spice levels or a delay in serving can result in days of subtle mockery and judgment. It was a Friday evening, the day the entire extended family gathered for a grand dinner. The responsibility of cooking the main meal, a complex, slow-cooked mutton curry, had been assigned entirely to Ayesha. Ayesha had been on her feet since 2 in the afternoon. She had chopped onions, ground fresh spices, marinated the meat, and tended to the heavy brass pot over a roaring flame. But fatigue is a silent thief. While she was multitasking, running upstairs to lay out clean towels for her father-in-law and soothing her sister-in-law's toddler, she stayed away from the kitchen 5 minutes too long. When she rushed back down, a dark, pungent smell hit her nose. "Oh no, 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 no!" Ayesha cried out, rushing to the stove and lifting the heavy lid. The bottom of the mutton curry had scorched. The dark, burnt layer had fused with the gravy, infusing the entire dish with a bitter, smoky taste. Ayesha's heart sank into her stomach. Her hands began to shake uncontrollably. Dinner was supposed to be served in 20 minutes, and there was no time or ingredients left to remake the meal. Tears of pure panic streamed down her cheeks. She tried to skim the top layer of the curry into a fresh dish, hoping to salvage whatever she could, but the smell of burnt food was unmistakable. Within minutes, the family gathered around the long dining table in the courtyard. Khala Asma served the food, her brow furrowing the moment the curry was poured into the serving bowls. The color was noticeably darker than usual. Hassan's uncle, Bade Chacha, took the first bite. He chewed slowly, his face contorting into a mask of utter disgust. He spat the food back onto his plate and slammed his spoon down. "What is this trash?" Bade Chacha roared, his voice echoing across the courtyard. It tastes like liquid ash. Who cooked this? The entire table went dead silent. Ayesha stood near the doorway of the kitchen, her head bowed, her body trembling with shame. Ayesha cooked it, Khala Asma said, her tone dripping with disappointment and anger. I told her to keep an eye on the stove, but she was busy wandering around the house. Look at how she wasted expensive meat and ruined dinner for the entire family. This is unacceptable. Tariq scoffed, pushing his plate away. A woman who cannot even cook a basic meal properly shouldn't be running a kitchen. In our family, we have standards. Ayesha felt as if the ground beneath her feet was opening up to swallow her whole. The stares of 14 people burned into her skin like hot coals. She felt completely defenseless, a failure in the eyes of her new family. Hassan sat at the middle of the table. He looked at the burnt curry on his plate, then looked up at Ayesha standing in the shadow of the doorway, her shoulders shaking as she wept quietly. Everyone expected Hassan to either join in the criticism to save his own face, or sternly reprimand his wife in front of the elders to assert his authority. Instead, Hassan calmly picked up his spoon. He scooped a portion of the burnt curry onto his plate, mixed it with rice, and took a large bite. He chewed deliberately, swallowing it without a single flinch or expression of distaste on his face. He took a second bite, then looked up at his mother and uncle with complete calm. Chachajan, Hassan spoke, his voice steady, warm and entirely devoid of anger. The food isn't ruined at all. Honestly, I find it hard to believe Ayesha made this, because the flavor is actually quite unique. She has been working non-stop since morning without a single moment of rest. Her health hasn't been great today, yet she stood over a hot stove for hours just to feed us. The entire room went still. Bade Chacha blinked in surprise. Khala Asma stared at her son, speechless. Hassan turned his eyes directly toward Ayesha, offering her a warm, protective smile that shielded her from every harsh word in the room. Ayesha, Hassan said loudly enough for everyone to hear, his voice filled with genuine appreciation, the food is fine. You worked so hard today. Please sit down and eat with us. You've done more than enough. Ayesha raised her eyes. Through the haze of her tears, she looked at her husband. He hadn't spent a single rupee to defend her. He hadn't bought her a piece of jewelry or a fancy dress. By simply controlling his tongue when everyone else was throwing stones, by taking her side when she was entirely defenseless, he had showered her with the highest form of love. The harsh atmosphere in the room instantly evaporated. Bade Chacha cleared his throat awkwardly, picking up his water glass. Khala Asma quietly took another bite of her food without saying another word. Ayesha stood by the doorway, her heart overflowing with a profound sense of safety. In that chaotic, demanding house, she realized she didn't need wealth or grand declarations to survive. She had Hassan's empathy, and that was an impenetrable shield. The silent struggle of illness, a month had passed since the incident in the kitchen. But the endless cycle of household chores in the Siddiqui house never slowed down. It was the peak of summer, the air was thick with humidity, and the ceiling fans barely pushed warm air around the rooms. Ayesha had woken up at 5 in the morning with a throbbing headache, and a fever that made her bones ache. In a joint family, however, a daughter-in-law's illness is often overlooked until she completely collapses. She dragged herself out of bed, careful not to wake Hassan, and went downstairs. By 9 in the morning, she had prepared breakfast for 14 people, washed 2 massive piles of laundry, and swept the long hallways. Her forehead was burning, her lips were dry, and every step felt like walking through deep mud. Ayesha, Khala Asma called out from the courtyard, holding a basket of heavy winter blankets that needed to be packed away in the attic. Take these upstairs, and after that, start prepping the vegetables for lunch. Your uncle wants a special spinach dish today. Ayesha took the heavy basket. Her vision blurred for a second, but she forced herself to speak. Yes, Ami Jaunt. I will do it right now. As she took the first step up the wooden staircase, her knees buckled. She dropped the basket, and the heavy blankets tumbled down the stairs. Ayesha collapsed onto the 3rd step, clutching her head, gasping for breath. Oh Lord, look at how careless she is, Khala Asma exclaimed, rushing over. You dropped the clean blankets right on the dusty floor. Just as Khala Asma reached the staircase to scold her further, a hand gently reached past her and helped Ayesha up. It was Hassan. He had just come downstairs after getting dressed for work. Hassan didn't shout at his mother, nor did he create a scene. He gently placed his hand against Ayesha's forehead. The heat radiating from her skin made him wince. She has a burning fever, Ami, Hassan said softly, his voice calm but firm. Fiver. Kala Asma frowned, looking at Ayesha suspiciously. She was fine an hour ago when she made tea. Young women these days have very low endurance. A little headached. And they act like they're dying. Hassan looked at his mother. He knew that arguing with her about endurance would only lead to a long, bitter debate that would hurt Ayesha even more. Instead, he chose a path of quiet wisdom. Hassan gently took the heavy basket of blankets from the floor and carried it up the stairs himself. He placed it inside the attic, walked back down and guided Ayesha toward their room. Hassan, who is going to cook lunch if she lies down? Kala Asma called after him, her voice rising in frustration. Hina has college and Seima is busy with her children. Hassan paused on the landing. He turned around and offered his mother a warm, respectful smile. Amy John, Hassan said smoothly, I have been craving food from the old city restaurant for weeks. Today, I'm ordering takeout for the entire family, my treat. You won't have to stand near the hot stove today either. Consider it a rest day for everyone. Kala Asma's stern expression softened instantly. The idea of not having to cook in the scorching heat, combined with a free meal paid for by her son, completely extinguished her annoyance. Well, if you insist, Hassan. Takeout sounds nice. Hassan walked into his bedroom and closed the door behind him. He helped Ayesha lay down on the bed, pulled a light blanket over her, and brought a bowl of cool water and a small towel. Ayesha looked up at him, her eyes heavy with fever and tears. Hassan, your mother will think I am lazy. I should go down and help. Hassan sat beside her on the bed. He dipped the towel in the cool water, wrung it out, and gently placed it on her burning forehead. Ayesha, Hassan whispered softly, taking her hand in his. Your health is not a sin. Resting when you are sick is not laziness. Let them think whatever they want. Right now, your body needs rest. Ayesha closed her eyes. As the cool cloth soothed her fever, a deep sense of relief washed over her soul. Hassan stayed by her side for 2 hours, changing the cool towels on her forehead, bringing her medicine, and ensuring she slept peacefully before he left for his office. He didn't make a grand declaration of defiance against his family, he simply used tact, generosity, and gentleness to protect his sick wife. The relatives' visit and subtle defenses. A few months later, the house was filled with extended relatives who had arrived for a family wedding. In joint families, visits from distant aunts and sisters-in-law often bring a barrage of unsolicited opinions, comparisons, and gossip. The women of the house sat in a circle in the spacious living room, sipping tea and chatting. Among them was Fupo Farida, Hassan's elder aunt, known throughout the family for her sharp tongue and critical nature. Ayesha was serving snacks to the guests, moving quietly from person to person. Fupo Farida watched Ayesha critically, her eyes tracing every detail of her simple cotton suit and unstyled hair. Asma. Fupo Farida spoke loudly, addressing Hassan's mother so the entire room could hear. Your eldest daughter-in-law Seima wears such lovely gold jewelry and heavy suits. But look at Ayesha, she dresses so simply. Does Hassan not buy her anything? Or does she simply not know how to carry herself like the daughter-in-law of a respectable family? Ayesha froze in the middle of the room, holding a tray of hot samosas. The room quieted down as relatives turned to look at her. Kala Asma looked slightly embarrassed. Well, Farida, Hassan's income is modest. You know how it is. Before Kala Asma could finish her sentence, Hassan walked into the living room to greet the guests. He had caught Fupo Farida's words from the doorway. Instead of getting angry or feeling insulted about his modest income, Hassan walked in with a relaxed, cheerful smile. He greeted his aunt respectfully, touching her feet in traditional fashion. Fupo John, Hassan said brightly, taking a seat nearby. I heard you talking about Ayesha's clothes. Fupo Farida shifted uncomfortably. Oh, Hassan's son. I was just saying she should dress up a bit more. After all, she is young. Hassan looked over at Ayesha and gave her a warm, appreciative look. Pippo John, Hassan replied, his voice rich with genuine respect. I am the one who asks her to dress simply. You see, real grace doesn't come from heavy silk or gold chains. Ayesha manages this entire house from morning till night with so much love and patience. Her real beauty lies in her character and her simplicity. I would rather have a wife whose presence brings peace to my home than one who shines only in expensive clothes. Fupo Farida was left completely speechless. The other female relatives exchanged subtle, admiring glances. Ayesha felt a flush of warmth spread across her cheeks, where another husband might have felt emasculated by comments about his income, or blamed his wife for making him look poor. Hassan had elevated her simplicity into her greatest virtue. He turned to Fupo Farida with a playful grin. Besides Fupo, gold prices are skyrocketing. I'd rather save that money to take Ayesha on a peaceful trip somewhere. The room broke into light laughter, and the awkward tension vanished completely. Ayesha set the tray down on the tea table. As she passed by Hassan, her hand lightly brushed against his shoulder. In that subtle touch was an unspoken message of profound devotion. A Sunday afternoon in the joint family. Sundays in the Siddiqui household were notoriously chaotic. School was out, the children ran wild through the courtyard, and the domestic workload doubled. On one particularly exhausting Sunday, Saima's 3 young children and Haina's visiting toddler were wreaking havoc in the central hallway. Toys were scattered everywhere, juice was spilled on the rug, and the children were screaming and fighting over a plastic truck. Ayesha was in the middle of washing a massive stack of lunch dishes in the open kitchen. Her hands were covered in soap suds, her back was aching, and every time she tried to step out to clean the spilled juice, one of the toddlers would run through it, spreading the sticky mess further. Saima was upstairs resting, and Kala Asma was taking her afternoon nap. The entire burden of managing the chaotic courtyard fell squarely on Ayesha's shoulders. Amir, don't spill that. Oh no. Ayesha cried out as Saima's 5-year-old son knocked over a vase near the coffee table. She wiped her soapy hands on her apron. Feeling on the verge of a complete nervous breakdown, she was exhausted, overwhelmed and ready to burst into tears. Suddenly, Hassan walked down the stairs, wearing his casual Sunday clothes. He didn't yell at the children, nor did he call Saima downstairs to complain about her unruly kids. He simply stepped into the courtyard, clapped his hands together loudly, and put on a booming, playful voice. "All right, monsters," Hassan announced with a wide grin. "Who wants to play the ultimate treasure hunt game with Uncle Hassan?" The 4 children stopped screaming instantly, their eyes lighting up. Me," they shouted in unison. "Rule number 1 of the game," Hassan said dramatically, pointing to the messy floor. "The person who picks up 10 toys and puts them in the basket gets a chocolate. The person who cleans the rug gets 2 chocolates." Within 3 minutes, the screaming toddlers transformed into a miniature cleaning crew. They giggled and scrambled across the room, picking up toys and wiping the floor under Hassan's cheerful supervision. Hassan then walked over to the open kitchen where Ayesha stood, staring at him in absolute awe. He took the dishwashing sponge right out of her soapy hands. "Hassan, what are you doing?" Ayesha whispered in shock, looking around nervously. "If your mother wakes up and sees you washing dishes, she will be furious. Let her wake up." Hassan smiled softly, pushing her gently away from the sink. "Go upstairs to our room, lock the door, and take a 1-hour nap. I'll handle the dishes and the kids." "But Hassan." "No buts, Ayesha," Hassan insisted, his eyes soft and commanding at the same time. "You haven't had a single moment of peace all week. Go." Ayesha walked upstairs as if in a dream. She lay down on her bed, listened to the distant, happy laughter of the children playing with Hassan downstairs, and fell into the deepest, most peaceful sleep she had enjoyed in months. When Kala Asma woke up from her nap an hour later and saw Hassan drying the last plate, she opened her mouth to complain. But Hassan immediately handed her a fresh cup of hot tea he had brewed himself. "Ami, I was just helping out a bit while playing with the kids," Hassan said pleasantly before she could speak. "You should see how well the children cleaned the courtyard today." Kala Asma looked at the spotless floor, looked at her happy grandchildren, took a sip of her favorite tea, and simply shook her head with a faint, reluctant smile. Hassan had diffused another potential storm with sheer charm and emotional intelligence. The climax in family transformation years passed, and the quiet, steady rhythm of Hassan's approach slowly began to transform the atmosphere of the entire Siddiqui house. One evening, after a major family religious gathering, the family sat together in the courtyard, relaxing over tea. Tariq, Hassan's elder brother, looked stressed. His textile business had hit a rough patch, and he had been forced to sell some of his assets. Saima sat beside him, looking distant and unhappy, holding a new gold ring that no longer brought her the joy it once did. Tariq looked over at Hassan and Ayesha. They were sitting near the edge of the veranda, helping their young daughter with her homework. Ayesha was laughing softly at something Hassan had whispered to her. There was no gold around her neck, no grand brand name clothes on her shoulders, yet her face radiated an undeniable, deep-seated peace and contentment. Tariq sighed heavily, rubbing his temples. "Hassan." Hassan looked up. "What is it, Bai?" "I spent years giving Saima gold, expensive clothes, and luxury cars." Tariq admitted candidly, his voice carrying a rare vulnerability in front of the family. I thought that was how a man shows love. But the moment business got tough and I couldn't buy her gifts, we started fighting every day. Look at you. You never had a big income, yet Ayesha looks at you as if you are the king of the world. What is your secret? The entire courtyard went quiet. Khala Asma bade Chacha, and the rest of the family turned their attention toward Hassan. Hassan set his teacup down slowly. He looked at his brother with deep warmth and humility. Bye. Hassan spoke softly, his words resonating clearly across the quiet courtyard. Love is not a commodity that you buy from a market with money, gold, or silver. Love is an emotion, a feeling that is born out of respect, attention, and daily character. He glanced at Ayesha, who looked at him with quiet pride. In a joint family, Hassan continued, a woman doesn't ask for a fortune. When she works all day until her feet ache, and dinner is delayed, controlling your anger and keeping quiet is love. When everyone criticizes her for a ruined meal, standing up for her and saying I like it is love. When she is sick, ordering food from outside so she can rest without feeling guilty is love. When children are crying and she is overwhelmed, stepping in to take the burden off her shoulders is love. Hassan looked at Tariq directly. Gifts can buy a woman's temporary smile, but respect, gentle words, and emotional support buy her heart for a lifetime. A heavy silence descended upon the courtyard. Tariq stared at his younger brother, the realization washing over him like cold water. Seima looked down at her hands, tears glistening in her eyes as she realized what had been missing in her marriage all along. Khala Asma wiped a stray tear from her eye, realizing how blessed her house was to have a son like Hassan. The balcony at night. Late that night, the house was dark and quiet. A cool night breeze rustled the leaves of the neem tree in the courtyard. Hassan stood on the small balcony of their bedroom, looking up at the star-lit sky. Soft footsteps sounded behind him as Ayesha stepped onto the balcony. She carried 2 small cups of cardamom tea. She handed one cup to Hassan and stood beside him. Resting her shoulder lightly against his arm, they stood in comfortable silence for a long time, sipping their tea, watching the quiet night. Hassan, Ayesha spoke softly. Do you remember the day I burnt the mutton curry years ago? She asked with a gentle laugh. Hassan smiled, remembering. How could I forget? It tasted like charcoal. Ayesha chuckled softly, resting her head against his chest. You ate 2 full plates of charcoal that night just to save me from tears. Hassan placed his arm around her shoulders, pulling her close against the cool night air. I didn't eat charcoal, Ayesha, Hassan whispered into her hair. I just protected my peace. You are my peace. Ayesha closed her eyes, listening to the steady, strong rhythm of his heart beating beneath her cheek. She didn't have gold bangles on her wrists, nor did she live in a palace. But in the middle of a chaotic, demanding joint family, she possessed the greatest fortune a woman could ever ask for: a husband who understood that love is not a thing to be bought. It is a feeling to be lived every single day.